Good morning, everyone who has dialed in this morning for our webinar. My name is George Wiafe from Eden Way Foundation. Please let me hear some sound if you are hearing me.
We can hear
Yes,
you,
Prof. We hear you very well and clear.
Thank you very much. So you can all hear me now. Okay, so today we're going to have the second of our webinar already. We scored the first one last Tuesday, and today we have a presentation from Mr. Meshack Kinyua Ndiritu. But before we do that, let me just do one quick housekeeping. And that is, last time we informed you that we have put the guidelines on the dashboard that you click, and then also for you to vote the social media platform that we will use by Friday midnight. Now, when you click the previous link, we have replaced it with GAIAthon'25 materials. So what happens is that when you click this link now, it opens into a folder, and in the folder, we'll be putting all the PowerPoints, the videos, any document on the summaries for the sessions, every information. So it will not only be the guidelines, it will be the guidelines plus subsequent materials that we want to share with you. That notwithstanding, we also have shared the presentation of last Tuesday on our YouTube link that you can access on the footer of our website. Okay, so that is just a quick one that I wanted to give you. Now, let us come to this morning's presentation, where we have Mr. Meshack Kinyua Ndiritu, who will be giving us the presentation today on the topic from prototype to profit, building an EO and IoT startup in Africa. Meshack is a very dear friend and is the training officer with the Global Monitoring for Environment and Security Africa program at the Africa Union Commission in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Meshack has over a decade of experience in space and emerging technologies, policy, and strategy. His work was instrumental in defining the African Outer Space Program and bringing the Africa Space Agency to life. Being the capacity building lead of the GMES Africa program, Meshack has facilitated the training of over 10,000 people in space and tech skills, funding of over 100 masters and PhD students in space-related fields. He has helped in building a continent-wide network of universities and institutions, and also has launched a digital learning hub to democratize access to space education. Meshack's fingerprints are on Africa's most ambitious tech and innovation strategies. He spearheaded the Africa Union strategy on artificial intelligence, co-authored the African Space Policy and Strategy, and shape the continent's roadmap for science and technology through what we call the STISA, or Science Technology Innovation Strategy for Africa 2024 plan. On a global stage, he's represented the continent in fora like the G20 Research and Innovation Working Group, a group championing open source tools and shared digital infrastructure to fuel collaboration. In short, Meshack is the kind of leader who doesn't just dream about the future of Africa. He's engineering it and is making sure Africa has a front row seat. I must add that he is also the CEO of AfriOrbit, and here he will give us some practical insight on what AfriOrbit is doing. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to welcome Mr. Meshack Kinyua Ndiritu. Meshack, you have the floor, and let me now move away and then give you access to the sharing screen. 1 second. So please take over from me, Meshack, and let's make sure that you can share your screen.
Thank you, Prof. I hope you can hear me.
Perfectly, sir. It's all
Okay,
yours.
perfect. Thank you, sir. I'm so humbled by, the introduction that you just gave, and we have decade-long experience together. We have worked in programs like, GMES in Africa. I came when the previous program of MESA, which is Earth Observation for Sustainable Development, was coming to an end. And we started off GMES in Africa with Professor Wiafe, and we benefited a lot from his inspiration and his guidance on how continental programs on Earth observation should be handled. So I really have the pleasure to meet you all, to meet you electronically, and I hope that I'll speak in good speed so that those who are French speaking can also be able to follow. Um, it's it's a great pleasure once again to be here with you. Uh, Prof, I really appreciate this and I pay tribute to you for welcoming me to this platform. What an amazing work that you've been doing. I mean, the dream that we talked about is no longer a dream. It's coming to reality. And thanking you all the leaders of institutions for joining Professor Wiafe to bring it to maturity. I will not be able to talk about, what Prof has already elaborated about my work at the African Union, um, with the African Space Outer Program and now the African Space Agency, which is based in Cairo. So I'm a space engineer by profession, and I'm usually, inspired by the techniques of doing things and engineering the thing and making it happen. And nothing could have prepared me more for such a challenge like, the IoT or the Internet of Things program that is happening with the Gaia. And I must appreciate Gaia community for what you have been able to do. So without much ado, as Professor Wiafe mentioned, I also co-lead and co-founded the AfriOrbit Space, and I'll give you a small background about it. So a few years after working with the African Space Program, I realized that, I think we are talking too much and we have not implemented programs that need to be to take advantage of space. And I was always, getting tired of people talking about what space can do, what space can do. And I really needed us to move into what space is doing and what space is impacting the communities. So what I'm going to present to you is the work that I'm doing privately, and we are working with Professor Wiafe on the Gaia platform. And essentially, I think all of you as the network to bring the IoT innovation to the African continent. Before founding AfriOrbit, I had also founded another entity called Omarichet. We had a group of young engineers and young enthusiasts whom we worked together to define the how the entry point on space can be. But along the line, we didn't quite agree on the idea, so we shelved, our marriage a little bit, and then we transitioned into AfriOrbit. And this happens mostly when you have, startups, because you're incubating ideas, and some of those ideas are not usually bought out by everyone. And when that happens, it's really not, a shame to move to another platform and get like-minded people. So AfriOrbit, for some reasons, my screen is not moving. Prof, I hope you can see my screen moving. So
Yes, I can
we
see.
are. Oh, perfect. So we are a space vertical company, and I'll explain what that means in real terms. We are looking at the verticals of both downstream and upstream and focusing on what we need to build in the upstream. And the upstream means, the space segment. So we are focusing on building the satellites itself, building the subsystems, and also on the downstream, we are looking at what we can use the satellite for. Before even going to space, we have to figure out on what exactly are we looking for. Earth observation is well known, but there are other domains like satellite communication and navigation and positioning, and et cetera, which are all working in tandem. Nowadays, you have the convergence of all these technologies to bring up very unique services which are seamless and they make sense to all of us when you're navigating or when you're using another observation product. We have to be alive to the fact that that particular product has some navigation, have some positioning embedded into it, because you have to do, the georeferencing and whatever to make sure that it has, a location based on latitude, longitude, and so on. So all these technologies cannot be treated in isolation. They are all merging, and that's why, the IoT is coming to the picture. So we're building and operating our own integrated satellite service. We are currently building it step by step. And at the same time, we are working to establish and operationalize an equatorial spaceport on the Kenyan coast. As you know, Africa is well located on the equator to provide a resource for the launching and operation of rockets and access to space, basically. And we are working with the Kenya Space Agency to make sure that this can also become a reality. So I will just present to you our ambitions, and then we highlight different programs like what we call the EduSpace, satellite communication, Earth observation, and then probably highlight on the equatorial spaceport if we have time. So these are the main projects that we are working on. We have the the equatorial spaceport safari, which I mentioned. We want to establish it on the Kenyan equatorial region to make sure that we have affordable access to space, not only for the African market, but globally. Communications, and this is where we have satellite IoT embedded. I will dwell actually on this one. And then Earth observation, and we have educational CubeSat and rocketry program for our educational project. And this is how the EduSpace program looks like. We have, so EduSpace just means education for space, and it's hands-on. It's meant to equip users or students or learners on the hands-on skills for development of the satellite. And on that, we have a product that we call EduSat. So EduSat is an educational satellite, which is a 1 unit. And I will break it into simple terms when we get there. We also have a plan to establish a robotics and rovers program within the EduSpace program. And we are already doing the rocketry program on it, and the CubeSat. CubeSat will be basically an improvised version of the EduSat. And this is how it looks like, the education, the CubeSat division. It will have a rover or robotics division, and then the rocketry division, which is already operational, and the IoT division, as well as the electronic assembly division. And here we also showcase, the different business models that we are looking at, taking advantage of, selling them as products and services. So the EduSat project. So educational satellite is the hands-on engineering with lean satellites in schools and industry. So what you see on the right is a demonstration of how it looks like. It's a 10 centimeter by 10 centimeter by 10 centimeters in measurement. So it's a cube, and it's equipped with all the subsystems that can be used to learn on different form factors of a satellite. It's fully functional. It's a fully functional CubeSat model that has been simplified so that you can pull out every part, or each part, or each component, or not component, but subsystem, and assemble them quickly to educate learners on the structure and operations of a nanosatellite. And we have a full curriculum, which is eventually going to be hosted on a Raspberry Pi testbed. We have started working on it on a user interface that will allow learners to access all the materials. We're going to also, structure some hackathons and datathons, using the EduSat to ensure that we equip the learners on the best ways to assemble and how to quickly put it together. Hackathon is usually a speed-paced way of learning, and we're going to use that to equip our learners. And we're moving a step further to ensure that we can also be able to capture data and analyze them for different applications. So this CubeSat you see here has the basics of the subsystems. If you are familiar with the building of the satellites, usually there are a number of subsystems that are very fundamental. One of them is what we call the OBC, which is a onboard computer. This is the brain of the satellites, which instructs the satellites on how to perform different tasks. Once you deploy your CubeSat and it's in space, or even going to space, you have to load it with programs that function like the brain, and they give different signals or instructions like satellites to know, for example, when to capture an image, when to send a signal back to Earth, and so on and so forth. So the OBC that we are currently using, we have been iterating on different microcontrollers that are used for the onboard computer. We started off with Raspberry Pi, which is a computer by itself, but it's too powerful for a small CubeSat. Then we downscaled that to an Arduino. Arduino is also powerful with the with the functionalities, but it also gets a little bit complicated when you want to load more programs. But it's very versatile. We saw that it couldn't work with some of our requirements, so we downscaled it further to what we call an ESP32 module, which is the main brain of the EduSat. Then after the OBC, we have the EPS. EPS is it refers to the electronic power subsystem, which now powers all the components of the CubeSat. So we have designed our own system. I mean, all these subsystems that I'm mentioning, we have built them from scratch, and we design the boards, and then we print them out, we test them, and then we integrate them, and we run the whole thing. We have done different versionings of the EduSat, the EPS, the OBC, and the sensor board. So the sensor board for now works as the payload or the main mission, and this sensor board has different sensors that measure the environment or the parameters on the environment, including temperature, humidity, air quality, etc. So all these are loaded onto the CubeSat, and they work in tandem. And the main goal of the EduSat program is basically to ensure that if we have a group of learners that want to master the working of the CubeSat or how the satellites work, if they enroll with us, we can train them through the verticals of software development, because you need a lot of firmware or software that needs to be loaded on the CubeSat into the different subsystems, including the OBC. And all these things need to know how to interact. All the subsystems need to know how to interact, and what does that is the software interface that allows them to interact with each other. Then we ensure that.
Excuse me, Meshack. Please, can we all mute our microphones? Somebody is disturbing our presentation. Please.
Thank you, Mark. I think we have here so many students he work in this thematics, and I think this game can help to identify players who are not very active in order to remobilize everyone for a better response for the
Mr. Biransisi, you are disturbing the presentation. This can be done during question time, please. Misha, can you go on, please?
Okay. I will try to go a little bit slower in case there is a challenge in understanding.
But please, if you can bring the key highlights so that when they ask questions, because we want to do within 30 minutes, and then they can have enough time to ask the questions, because this is an exciting presentation. But anyway, you carry on and be flexible about how you want to go about it.
Okay, so I'll try to move a little bit fast. So the goal of the EduSat for us is to equip the students in the areas of hardware and software development, because all of them interact when it comes to deployment of a full mission, whatever the mission you want to accomplish with space. And I think I will also highlight more when we come to the IoT, which is the mainstay of our discussion today. So I will not dwell so much here, but the EduSat can equip you with testing and integration. It can equip you with component identification. We can equip you with the software development and debugging, subsystem development, 3D printing and whatever, and additional programs that are dependent on the mechanicals and the electronics part of it, as well as the software part of it. The new version now that we are implementing has capability to include IoT demonstrations, and this is what we are implementing together with the Gaia community. Thanks to Professor Wiafe for bringing us on board. We want to have a demonstration on how the CubeSat can interact with the IoT sensor networks. And at the same time, the CubeSat will also have its own sensor board, which is the air quality, temperature, humidity, etc. And these are very suitable for monitoring environmental health and the atmosphere. So demonstrations of IoT with the CubeSat, AfriOrbit is supporting a consortium of, and we supported a consortium of 3 countries to develop CubeSat under the UNOSA CubeCube program. And our main modules are the SDR, which is the software-defined radio for IoT communications. And it's the same thing that we are going to use here in the Gaia collaboration. So the AfriOrbit is working with Gaia for the deployment and demonstration of the satellite IoT. I would say not even a program, but a project that will highlight how the working or the protocols for communicating between IoT and the satellite will work. This is just a highlight of the rocketry program that we have done before. We have launched a number of satellites to about 2,000 feet. We built our what we call the avionics board. The avionics board, again, is the brain of the rocket. We have built it from scratch. We design it and we use it to measure parameters as the rocket goes up. And it comes down, we have a profile of measurements that can be students also use to analyze the data and plot some graphs and make their own analysis. And this is how it looks like. So again, we design it from scratch and we print it out and we embed it on the rocket. This is the equatorial spaceport that I talked about before. We have an ambition to establish this by next year, and we are in discussion, with the main entities or the main stakeholders to deploy, to start, assessing how the equatorial spaceport can be brought to maturity. And this will involve the rocket launching pads. It includes all the ecosystem that involves, it's not just launching. We are considering, the manufacturing value chain of it, the satellite processing, as well as the rocket processing, the fuel preparation, and all the industries that can that are usually dependent or usually required for the preparation of the rocket to go up. So it's not just a launching pad, but all the ecosystem around it, including the hospitality and where tourists come to watch, when the rockets are launching. So it's the reason why we have named it the Equatorial Spaceport Safari, because there's a safari involved in the interaction between science and nature. For the EO, I won't dwell on this so much, but we have a novelty that we want to introduce into the community, which is to eliminate, the ground stations. And I think in the next slide, it includes, the value proposition that we are talking about. So we, if you look at this picture here, we want to incorporate, a technology in which, the satellite an Earth observation satellite, instead of downlinking the data, it processes that with the AI machining or the AI chips that is on it to synthesize the data and send it to the cloud immediately. And then the user can interact with the cloud to download whatever products that they need, instead of using ground stations to bring the data back to the Earth. And this is a novelty that we want to introduce. We will be we are also seeking, the funding to enable us get to that. But this is informed because of the various analysis that we have done, that we spend a lot on the ground stations, operations and maintenance, which if could be avoided, then we will take a burden from the institutions that process data and store the data. So we remove, the pain of receiving, processing, and storage, and give you, the full product. And this is something that we are keen to implement in the near future. Let's now dwell on the satellite IoT connectivity, which is the concept that we are all, I think, familiar with, basing or judging from what you have been doing in the Gaia community. And, we just want to test in phases or iterate, the different technologies, because they have worked before. And IoT is a huge market that we want to unlock. We want to connect the IoT devices by 2030. It's expected that about 25 billion IoT devices will be deployed globally, and all these need to be connected to the internet somehow, or they need to interact with each other somehow. There needs to be that network of the IoT interaction. And if you have 25 billion devices globally, then you need a system that can bring them to a network, or that can at least map them out and can create a platform for them to, handshake or provide interaction among them. And there are different challenges in doing this. There are coverage gaps, especially in the remote areas where we need to deploy those devices. There is no internet, or there is no proper gateways in which those networks or those devices can interact from. There's dependence on the ground infrastructure, which seems to be costly when you map it out in the scale of billions of devices that need to be deployed. And then there is the scalability and the mobility limitation. So you can't just take IoT devices or be moving around with them. They need to be, somewhere where they are, collecting information in situ, and then you interact with the results, whether remotely, or if you have the luxury of time, you can interact with them physically where they are. But in most cases, you need to ensure that the data is moved mostly to the cloud, to ensure that one can monitor them remotely. So this is where the satellite connectivity comes. So we utilize, you have different ways of utilizing the satellite here. A few terminologies like LEO, MEO, and GEO. These are just the altitudes in orbits where these satellites operate. Nowadays, there is a lot of interest on the LEO, which is the low Earth orbit. And the low Earth orbit is something between 250 kilometers to, let's say, 2,000 kilometers. And that allows you to have a good latitude for you to reduce the latency that is involved when you're transferring the signals. So that's why people are moving away from the GEO, which is the geostationary, and the MEO, which is the medium Earth orbit, to low Earth orbit, in order to reduce the latency or the time required for the signal to move from the satellites to the ground. It's very important. It's very versatile, and it's very flexible because it enables global coverage. As the satellites are moving, they can be sending data from one point to the other. The IoT devices interact with a gateway to the satellites, and then to the ground station, and then to the cloud. So that's the main architecture, and it uses different bands, mostly the narrowband and low power communication protocols. So you reduce in terms of power consumption. So this is what we are working towards. The system architecture would look like, you have edge devices which are deployed in a peripheral or in a certain location, and they are collecting regularly the environmental data, which includes temperature, humidity, location, air quality, etc. And then they interact with a gateway. So the gateway is like the central point in which data is aggregated, and from there you can pick it up with a CubeSat or whatever satellite platform it is to the terminal, and you retrieve it. Then the LoRa network, which is the main protocol for communication, you either send it to the ground again if need be, or you send it to the cloud. So this is the main interaction. If you need to send it to the ground, we are implementing a software-defined radio ground terminal, which will interface between the LoRa gateway and the CubeSat to ensure that if you say, for example, you have a location in Cote d'Ivoire and you're based in Ghana, you can be able to get get the data from Cote d'Ivoire, upload it on the CubeSat, and then wait for the CubeSat to come in your horizon, and then you downlink the data to the ground station. Alternatively, you can get it real time when the CubeSat pushes that information to the cloud. And this is the main or the ideal way that we are looking at it. So the main key applications for the satellite IoT, and I know you're familiar with this because you're already doing one, smart agriculture and irrigation. So if you have a big farm, or not only a big farm, but if you have a smart farm, you deploy some sensors to give you indications of the parameters like nutrient content, water content on the soil, soil moisture, the health on the product or the crop that you're farming, and just such housekeeping to monitor the health of your farm. You can deploy those devices, and then you connect them to the gateway, and the CubeSat will pick that information and push it to the cloud for your access. The same thing that we want to do for the aquaponics devices that you have for the IoT. This will be on the coastal and marine ecosystem, let's say blue economy in general. Logistics and asset tracking is also another one for the mobile devices or for the mobility sector. Pipeline monitoring and in oil and gas, disaster management, ship traffic monitoring, etc., etc. We can industry, smart industry and factories. All these are use cases of potential users for the IoT devices and connectivity. And there are so many benefits, like I think we have highlighted already, that there is global coverage, there's high reliability and uptime, scalability to millions of devices, and secure remote monitoring when you deploy a satellite dedicated for the IoT. The main technical considerations, and we are facing this already in our design, is the power consumption. Power consumption is really not a big deal when it comes to the IoT connectivity, but the issue is when you keep piling peripherals of the subsystems that will eat into your power, because there is a power budget of the CubeSat, and you have to remain within that threshold. Otherwise, it can become complicated and the power may not be able to balance up. Bandwidth and data limits. This is usually a case because the LoRa gateway that we are using, sometimes it's limited in the data rate, and this has to be. There are a lot of workarounds that needs to happen in order to accommodate a bigger bandwidth. But so far, and those who have gone even ahead of us, LoRa gateway has proved to be the most reliable for sending data from that distance of about, let's say, 1,000 kilometers in space and moving it back to the other or to the cloud. Latency, which is not a main issue for now, because if you access low Earth orbit, you can be able to move into latencies of about microseconds, which is the same, close or comparable to what latency exists in the fiber optic. So it's not a big issue. Cost of hardware and operation, again, you can downscale these, but it needs to be massively scaled. For you to lower the cost, again, the economics of scale need to be high. These are the players that have gone ahead of us. Lacuna Space has implemented one. GMES has also implemented a few satellites that are being used for the IoT connectivity. Swarm Technologies, which has been acquired by SpaceX, is also doing the same. But the market is huge. Like I said, we are expecting more than 25 billion devices to be deployed, and not all of them. None of these can satisfy the entire market. So there's still room for improvement and room for more players to come in. And that's why we are doing this. So our ambition is to integrate further, the 5G and the non-terrestrial networks. Once we move from the step of connecting the gateways, the next step for us is to now implement the 5G and ensure that we have the capabilities, and the 5G is usually dependent on the latency to ensure that we have affordable mass market satellite for the IoT chips. And this is how the architecture looks like. This might be subject to revision, but we want to deploy them in different orbits so that we have a global coverage. So if we deploy 100 satellites in different orbits, they can be able to interact and ensure that there is always a coverage at any particular point so that there is no data gap. And we also envisage to include an AI-enhanced, satellite IoT platform that allows for a computational, high computational powers and high reasoning for synthesis and analysis of the data that comes from the devices or from other integrated services, which includes Earth observation. Okay. This is where we are. We are testing the subsystems. This is what we have been doing for the last couple of months. We have been able to design the most necessary or the fundamental boards. Okay, so we have been able to implement and print out the OBC boards, which is the brain of the satellites. We have been able to test the power subsystem, and they are all working. And recently, last week, we tested I think there's a interruption. So last week we have been able to complete the handshake between the IoT devices that you have and our IoT board that will be on the satellite, which means that they will interact. We have been able to exchange and program the boards to implement, some tests for on the ground before we move them to the space to ground testing. This is how it looks like at the moment. On my far left or lower left, you can see the testing that is happening. This is the IoT board that we are using. Again, it uses the LoRa network, the LoRa gateway, which is the same gateway that your IoT gateway is using. So we have been able to establish that particular handshake. And this is the iteration that we are going through right now. We will be able to integrate all of them in the coming 1 or 2 weeks. We have been testing them individually as boards, and now we will integrate them to ensure that they can produce a product or at least work as a complete package. So we are not that many, but we have a team that is working with us. We also want to thank Professor George for availing, his resources and guidance to allow us, move faster. I don't know whether Chris is here, but I think he had mentioned that he could join the meeting. He has been also very instrumental. Thanks to Prof and your team for allowing us, to work together on this. So I will stop here for now. I know I have passed by like 10 minutes. Bear with me, and I had to go through all the content, but I hope it was not as confusing, and I hope that you have been able to derive the most important content from the presentation. So thank you so much, and I look forward to the interaction.
Thank you very much, Meshack, for this insightful presentation. This is very good. And for the participants online, I don't want to talk too much. I'll just quickly ask Meshack to manage the Q&A. So I will not interfere as the questions comes. Please engage and answer, and then you can go ahead and read the questions as they come in the chat box so that we don't spend too much time on it. So please ask your questions on mute and go straight to your questions, and then Meshack will answer. This is to benefit you as you come out with your solution for the GAIAthon. So please, the floor is open for questions and answers. Well, whilst we are waiting for the first question, Meshack, just highlight on how you have kept yourself going, knowing that on the continent it's not as easy as in the West, where facilities are available, funds are available, there are venture capitalists who are interested in financing. How have you kept yourself going over the years?
That's a very important question, Prof. In fact, it has been I've been driven by passion, which means sometimes digging into the pockets. For the past couple of years, I've been sustaining it through my pocket. Without we have tried to bootstrap for some time, but the bootstrapping needs people who also are moved by the same passion, and it's not always the case. So and the resources are not always available. So we have been it has been a struggle, but what has kept us going is the passion and the goal where we are targeting. Uh, so I have had to maintain things like the rent. We have maker spaces within our communities, and so we have been utilizing that, which is low cost, but it's costing some money. The engineers who work with us also needs to be maintained. So it has been a little bit of a hassle. So recently we have been adopting a strategy where we work with institutions like yours. Because we are based in Kenya, we initiated a discussion recently with the Regional Center for Mapping, RCMRG, and they are willing to host us. They see the potential of what we can offer and what we can do together in terms of mass scaling the solution and adding value to some of their projects. So we have had a discussion, and they are willing to host us. At least that will remove the pain of paying rent and all that. But then there will be also associated costs to that, which we need to factor in. We haven't raised any funding until now. But I think once we do a proper use case, that's where the funding will come from. And we are also, so the way we are strategizing, and I think I highlighted in one of the slides, is to have different market products. Once we have a product like the EduSat it's a one unit educational satellite that we will deploy capacity building or dedicated training. And when the institutions, pay us for the service fee, we can maintain ourselves. So at this point, we are looking forward to deploying as much as we can and the different products as much as we can, including the capacity building and the sale of the EduSat kit to educational institutions so that we can keep going.
Thank you. I don't seem to be seeing any hands up. I think your message has gone down very well. Then our participants are really chewing upon the solution. Somebody just asked, can the EduSat help us acquire recent Earth images? That's a question from somebody.
Okay, yeah, interesting. So on Earth observation, so the EduSat itself cannot fly because it's for educational purposes. But the Earth observation program that we are looking at, we will deploy CubeSat en masse, which will be able to acquire real-time images. And like I said, we push those images to the cloud directly without you waiting for the CubeSat to come to your horizon, so that you can have real-time data and information. So yeah, it's part of the medium-term goal that we have. I see another one.
Okay, I think this one is asking me whether this is a project presented to the student to follow as an example. We have a time limit of up to 6 weeks for you to develop your solution. So in adopting such an example, you have to be very careful to stay within the time limit because this is on a grand scale. So it might be difficult to implement this thing from start to end on your own during this GAIAthon, but it should inspire you to see what is feasible. And then there are already satellites out there. How can you interface with data already available or on your own in a small scale? So this is what you have to think about.
Yeah, thank you, Prof. And eventually, if we, at the time when we deploy the full EduSat, we can demonstrate. I mean, this is the plan that we have to demonstrate a use case in which we deploy a number of the IoT devices that you have on the ground through a gateway and then interact with the CubeSat and be able to send messages and receive them to demonstrate the full cycle of IoT and satellite communication. After that, that's our plan to deploy, a constellation of them. I also see a question about the power being a big problem and someone asking about the solar energy. Yes, indeed. Indeed, our CubeSat, if you see in one of the slides that I showed, we have a solar panel which is deployed on the CubeSat, because to access the energy in space, you mostly rely on the solar power. It's the most predominant. But the limits of that is because you have to have batteries that can store the energy for a long time. The cycles between day and night, especially if your satellite is working both day and night, they have to be balanced. So power, I wouldn't say it's a big problem for the time being because the devices that we have and the subsystems are not so much power hungry. They can be able to sustain themselves. But when it comes to the deployment of massive subsystems, that's when the power becomes a problem.
Well, whilst we are waiting for the other questions, we will be trying to bring Meshack down to Gaia first, hopefully, and then that will be an opportunity for another level of interaction, as well as bringing other industry players to Gaia Fest. So please push her to be part of Gaia Fest 2025. Meshack, just tweaking a little bit from your core presentation, as the officer in charge of capacity building at the GMES and Africa program, what are some of the opportunities in line with what Africa Union is doing, and as well as some of these incubation innovation challenges on the continent? What is the direction and some of the opportunities available for students?
Oh, yes. You might have heard that the newly established African Space Agency is getting operational this year. That's true. And the African Space Agency has a lot of opportunities at the time being. We have also different projects and programs that are coming up. The recent one that is concretized is the New Space Partnership Program with the European Union. It has several components, and we have tried to make it as exciting as possible in the upstream, gauging from the fact that the previous programs have always focused on the downstream, and I think it's now a time to also balance up and have upstream components, and that includes training on satellite engineering through hackathons and summer camps. They will be announced. There's a website that I will put on the chat now for the African Space Agency, so that you can look at the different opportunities that will. So stay tuned to this website, because most of the announcement will come through on this website. The program that I mentioned, the New Space Partnership with the African Space Agency or with the European Union, it will involve the startups. The startups will be incubated and empowered to develop their products. We will also have the academia and early career researchers to enhance their engineering capabilities by participating in satellite engineering programs. So this will be important for you to keep tabs. At the same time, we are also hoping for more programs to come through. And those programs will include, there is the application side, which is what we have been doing, Earth observation, remote sensing, and etc. But there will be more projects that will also go upstream, including satellite communication, navigation, etc. So depending on your area of interest, it's important to keep, checking that website.
Thanks, Misha. There's a question from somebody, Soul Jean, about last week. Please, any of you that have any challenge with the registration, kindly send email to info@edenwayfoundation.com explaining your problem. Following from what Meshack has just said, we'll be having the president of the Africa Space Agency coming to give a presentation. So continue to watch out on our website, because when the president comes, he will outline the details, and we are collaborating very well with Africa Space Agency to give you the opportunities. So please bear that in mind. Well, whilst we are waiting, we have just about 6 minutes. Let me add this one to the housekeeping, and when the question comes, Meshack, you can take it up and then answer. So far, by close of midnight yesterday, we have these universities who have completed their registration. So they are university from Benin, from Cameroon, from Ethiopia, and then Ghana Communication Technology University, the KNUST from Ghana, took Kenya, Malawi, Nigeria, and Tunisia. So we have these universities who have completed their registration. Cote d'Ivoire, we have 2 students who have to update their profile. From Egypt, the coordinator is streamlining the registration. From Ghana, University of Mines and Technology will be finalizing it tomorrow. And the University of Ghana, 1 or 2 students have to update their profile. From Senegal, they'll be sending me the confirmed list tomorrow. From Togo, some students have to update their profile, and we have in excess of the requirements. So the coordinator will be cutting it down. And then from Uganda, they are just finalizing the cleaning. So please respectfully request that all these are done quickly by close of day tomorrow. And also don't forget that voting is still going on. if we have the number that completes voting by tomorrow for the social media platforms, that is what we are going to use for the competition. So you have to be sure that your platform is there. There is a $500 that you win as an individual. So this is the information we have for you at the moment. I'm not seeing any questions, so I'll give the opportunity to you, Meshack, to wrap up your presentation, and then we draw the curtain.
Prof, thank you. I think there's a hand up from Charlene.
Yeah.
So please go ahead and engage.
All right. Thank you, Meshack. That's a very amazing presentation. I'm really glad to know what I think AfriOrbit is doing. And I think this question is just more apart from the development and the application side of the IoT. So this more touching on the policy aspect, like talking about, you mentioned about downstream impact, and that's one of the emotions.
Charlene, I'm having challenges to hear you clearly. I think
Oh,
because of your mic.
okay, okay. How about now?
Yeah,
Can you?
better now. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I was saying that was a great presentation, and I just wanted to ask a question in line with policies. So this is aside from the development aspect and the application side of IoT satellites. So you mentioned that one of your ambition is to launch a constellation of CubeSats in space, which is a very great aspect for collecting data. And you mentioned the part of, the CubeSats are going to the low Earth orbit. But now we understand, of course, in the space also it's a bit getting crowded. So can you just discuss a bit about the space situation, the space traffic and the space situational awareness about that?
Yeah, thanks, Charlene. This is a valid question. Indeed, the low Earth orbit is getting crowded because of the massive deployment of different constellations, like Starlink and the Kuiper and many others that are coming up. It's getting interesting because it's an accessible, easily accessible orbit, which means that it costs less to get access to low Earth orbit. You have low latency. You have a lot of other benefits, and it also comes with its own cons because once you deploy your electronic equipment in low Earth orbit, it means that it's a highly volatile region when it comes to the interaction with different atoms, and it degrades the equipment very quickly. So the plasma, and the other radiations that usually don't go well with or they don't cope very well with electronics in big numbers in low Earth orbit. So what that means that it's that the satellites that get deployed to low Earth orbit, they also get to the end of life very quickly. So they either run out of fuel or run out of the resilience in terms of interaction with the atoms, and therefore the concession nowadays is to have your constellation either burn up in the atmosphere, or you provide a way in which once your satellite comes to the end of life, you dispose it and remove it from the low Earth orbit. So yes, it's crowded, but there is also a high turnover in terms of the satellites that get access to it because of that constraint of the time, which means that you can have new replacements each 5 years or each 3 years. I think the agreement now is to have the shortest period as 5 years to avoid a lot of pollution in that particular orbit. So yes, the space is small in that region, but it doesn't mean that it's not available. It becomes, there's a high turnover, which gives you more chance to get there. But it's highly regulated also, and more needs to be done to ensure that not everyone can, or not, anyone with bad intentions can also get there, and therefore fulfilling, for example, the time frame or the lifetime of the satellite is one of the things that help to regulate that environment and many others. So yes, I do agree with your concern, but it shouldn't be a discouragement for especially the African continent to access the low Earth orbit. In fact, more than 80%, I would say, of the African satellites are in low Earth orbit.
So please, your concluding thoughts in 30 seconds as we draw the curtain, please.
Okay, and I would do, as I take this question that came in, is it a minor satellite that will be put in space for observation? Yes, normally in the low Earth orbit, you don't invest in big satellites. Usually they are sizable satellites that can accomplish your mission in comparable to the conventional satellite, but with less resources and with shorter time frame or lifetime. So yeah, I thank you for all that you are doing. We hope, the main reason why we came for this presentation is because we believe there is a niche between, the ground sensor networks that you're working on and how, our CubeSat can also help to deploy and to bring them to the cloud, or especially when you have a vision of implementing those missions in remote areas that have no access to internet. And this is why myself and Prof, we agree on how, we can work together, because we see the potential and we are focusing on building African solutions. Prof is very adamant on that we have to think Africa and do it in the African way. And there's a lot of solutions and a lot of skills that exist on the continent. We want to demonstrate that we can be able to have locally thought solutions that answer to our own local needs. And we demonstrate that to the world that, we are capable to run, the space programs that are in our hand. Because as the African Space Agency comes to maturity, we will have more programs and our work will be more meaningful if we have locally made solutions and technologies that can be of benefit to the continent. Yeah, so thank you, Prof, for giving us this opportunity. We have shared our vision, and this vision will be, and it makes it even easier for us to be accountable to fulfill this vision in the near future.
And on behalf of all of us, I would like to thank you so much, Meshack, for this wonderful presentation. We thank you very much. And then for our wonderful participants of the GAIAthon and audience and everybody, next week we have two additional exciting topics on Tuesday and on Thursday. You don't want to miss it. We'll share the link on our website, and then on Tuesday, as early at 10 o'clock GMT, we'll come online. Thank you very much, and all of you stay well.
Thank you, Prof. And
thank you, Professor.